What's going on, y'all? We are going to learn how to find arc length today. So the way that I want you to think about this is imagine you are a sprinter and you are going to run around the school track. We know that one lap around the track is 400 meters. And instead of calling it a lap, let's call it the circumference, even though it's not a circle. And let's say, because you're a sprinter, you're not going to run the full lap. You're only going to run a fourth of a lap. So the question is, how far are you going to run? I think both you and I know how you would do this. You would take 400, you would multiply it by 1 over 4. So you get 400 divided by 4, that's 100 meters. But let's go ahead and generalize this a bit. So 400 was the circumference. And 1/4 was the part of the lap. But in this case, we're going to call it the part of the circle. And that is the length that you traveled. And this is exactly how you find arc length in a circle. Instead of calling it the part of the circle, we're going to take the measure of the arc and we're going to divide it by 360. So this is the part that you're measuring, and this is the whole circle. So this is how we find the fractional part of the circle that we want to find. So let's take a look at an example. Find the length of the arc. We were given that the circumference is 12. So this is really important. The circumference is 12. And the length of the arc, well, the arc is 60 degrees. So here's our formula. We're going to take the circumference and multiply that by the measure of the arc and divide it by 360. And that's going to be our answer, the length. All we have to do is plug stuff in. So the circumference is 12. Let's write 12. The measure of the arc is 60. So you're just going to write 60. And it's over 360. And that's equal to the length. So we just have to evaluate this. 60 over 360, that's going to be equal to 1/6. So we have 12 divided by 6, that's equal to 2. So the length of AB is 2 units. And that's it. All right, let's move on to a harder example. All right, so here is another example. So this time, the circumference is 5 pi. And we're not given the arc measure. Instead, we're given the central angle. Remember that the central angle is going to be equal to the measure of the arc. So the measure of AB is also equal to 120. So now we can do the same thing that we did last time. The circumference, 5 pi, is multiplied by 120 over 360 is equal to our length. 120 over 360, that reduces real nice to 1/3. So our length is just going to be 5 over 3 pi. And that's our answer. Let's go ahead and move on to another example. All right, let's find the length of AB here. In this case, we're not given the circumference. Instead, we're given the radius. So we're going to have to think of another formula to come up with the circumference. So here's the formula for circumference. We got circumference is equal to 2 pi r. So let's go ahead and calculate this. The circumference is equal to 2 times pi. Well, our radius is 3. So it's just times 3. So this is equal to 6 pi. All right, and now we can do what we did in the last example. We're given the circumference, and we can find arc AB. It's the same as the central angle. So measure of arc AB is 45 degrees. Now we can find our arc length. Remember, it's circumference times the measure of the arc over 360. This is equal to L. This is going to be the length. So the circumference is 6 pi. Measure of angle A, or measure of arc AB, sorry, is 45 over 360. This is equal to L, the length. So we can reduce 45 over 360. That is going to be 1 over 8. And now we have 6 pi over 8. That's going to be 3 over 4 pi. So L is equal to 3 over 4 pi. And we're going to go with one more example. All right, so here's the last example we're going to go with. This is probably the most complicated example that we're going to have. We are given the radius, and we're also given an inscribed angle. So let's work with this one step at a time. Let's find the circumference. We know how to do that already. The circumference is equal to 2 pi r. We know that r is 5. So this is going to be equal to 2 pi times 5, which is equal to 10 pi. So now we know what the circumference is. Now we have to find the measure of arc AB. And now since the vertex, this is on the circle, so the arc is going to be, or you know what? 1/2 the arc length is going to be equal to the angle. This is how we learned it in class. So the arc is going to be 30. It's going to be double this inscribed angle. So we know that the measure of AB is 30. And now we have to find the arc length. So we're given everything we need. The circumference, 10 pi, times 30 over 360. 30 is the measure of the arc. This is going to be equal to L, the length of AB. 30 over 360 reduces to 1 over 12. We have 10 pi here. So 10 pi divided by 12, that's going to be equal to 5 over 6 pi. And this is the length. So that is how to find the arc length of a circle.